Our next speaker is Rod Walker. Rod's been with Freedom Furniture since '94, and I'm particularly excited that he's made his time available to share his story, because what he does is puts a real practical focus on this challenge of moving from the short term to the long term. So much so that what caught my attention was when his company delisted, and one of the motivations behind that delisting was simply to get out of the clutches of a short-term market-driven profit focus to a long-term strategic value focus. Now that sounds all kind of jargon, but I was talking to a couple of his staff in Melbourne within a couple of months of them delisting, and I said, so from a practical hands-on point of view, has this made any difference to your life and freedom? And it was just very clear that yes, in the last couple of months we have more systems, more training that are essential for us to really build a long-term, value, profitable organisation, a sustainable organisation, to use that word. And it was very, very clear. Now, the other thing that I love about this organisation is its culture. And have we got any of the Freedom Furniture folks here today? Oh, you're much more vocal in Melbourne, I must confess. I went to their annual conference, and they have the 300 people, and Rod will share a bit more about that, but the energy that you get from these people is extraordinary. I was having a few drinks, and I think this is a real sign of the culture when you talk to the folks who actually work in Freedom. And I was having drinks with them, and I think it was about 3 or 4 people in a row who said, oh, we all left Freedom because they didn't pay us enough. And I said, well, why are you back? They said, well, we just love what we do and we love the culture. Now, I don't think there's much of a greater compliment you can get as a leader, as a culture, than that sort of commitment and loyalty. As I say, Rod is going to present the challenges that he's faced within Freedom, moving from a short to a long term. And what you'll see about this gentleman is just an assumption that you'd be looking at the long term rather than the short term. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Rod Walker from Freedom Furniture.
I'm actually a little bit nervous today. I'm not normally nervous at these things. I'm a little bit nervous. I have my daughter in the audience today. She's in the final year of a human resource business degree, and she's said she's going to critique my presentation today. So, and my son's 15-year-old boy. He's a computer whiz, of course, and he's going to critique my PowerPoint slides. So, I'm just a little bit nervous. Freedom's made up of lots of brands and lots of different things. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment, but as a prelude to what I'd like to talk to you about, I think it is important to say that I think that you can achieve results in an organisation if you're a red organisation, if you want short-term results. In my mind, that's very clear. I know in Roman times, a Roman army would go to war, and if they started to lose and their army started to run, they'd bring the army back. When they gathered them all up, they'd bring them all back and they'd line them up, and every 10th person had to step forward, and every 10th person was then executed. Now, I'd suggest to you that's probably a red sort of culture. And I'd also suggest that they probably got pretty good short-term results, although I would think their recruitment program probably suffered a little bit in the long term. So I think you can get results in the short term if you want a red culture, but if you want long-term sustainable results, I believe that you need a more humanistic, encouraging sort of culture, a blue culture, and I'm going to be talking about that today. I'm going to be mainly talking about the Freedom brand. We've got lots of brands. I'll mainly talk to you about the Freedom brand because that's the one we've done the most cultural work in. Everybody in life is different. I don't think there's any question about that. We all think differently. We look differently. No, I'm not the one doing the yoga. You might note that up the top, the group in the t-shirts with the bald heads, that's my senior team. I might talk about that a little later. But everybody leads differently. We all think differently. And how you lead your people to a large extent will determine how they perform. Many times in my career, I've seen someone who's been a good performer, and with great leadership, they've become a very good performer. I've seen someone who's very good become excellent, and someone who's excellent become extraordinary with good leadership. I'm sure you all have. I've seen someone who's good become bad with poor leadership. And I've seen someone bad go out the door with bad leadership. So how we lead our people to a large extent determines how they will perform. I think there's a lot of factors that determines how we look at things, how we lead, and how we see things. I'd like to ask you, who in the audience is driving the car of their dreams? Now, I don't mean just the car you'd like to have, but the car that you would love to have. Even if you don't think a lot of cars, it's not really big in your life. You might drive a 65 VW that you love, but occasionally you look and see another car that you'd really love to have. So who drives the car of their dreams? Absolutely the car of their dreams. Very few people. A few people. So this will be easy for you. For those of you who don't, I want you to just relax and I want you to think about the car of your dreams. It might be any car. Could be that car. It might be that car. It might be one of those cars. But the car of your dreams, Rolls-Royce, Ferrari, think about it. And you've finally saved enough money to buy that car. You put away your bonus every year, just a little bit of money every year, and you've finally saved enough money to buy the car of your dreams. And you go to the showroom to pick it up, and you arrive, and there it is, in the showroom window, sparkling, looking magnificent, shining. And you open the door and that wonderful new car smell comes wafting out, and you sit down and you put your 6-track CD player on, and you drive off, and you're driving home in your wonderful new car, and you're just enjoying it. It's fantastic. You're loving it. And you're driving along, enjoying the air conditioning and the music blaring on your CD player. And lo and behold, you make a turn in the wrong direction and whammo. And while you're sitting there with trying to get the airbag out of your face, right, it suddenly hits you. All of a sudden, bang, you suddenly remember that you forgot to get insurance on this new car. Oh, bugger. So I want you to tell me on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, no big deal, through to being 10, you're probably going to go to the Harbour Bridge and jump. Right? Is this a big deal in your life? So who's a 1? This is no big deal. 3 people, 4 people. Who's a 2? Who's a 3? This is getting a little bit of serious. 4? Still not too many. 5, this is pretty major. This is starting to get major. Few people. 6, this is now getting serious. 7, you're really pissed off about this, huh? Yeah. 8, this is like a major occurrence in your life. Few people. 9, you'll go to the Harbour Bridge, but you won't end up jumping. Right? 1. I know what he drives. And 10, you're going to jump. Any 10s? Okay. All right. I want you to put that out of your mind for a second. Put the crash out of your mind. You're now driving home in your new car. You picked up a new car. It's a fabulous car. Go back to that position, okay? You're driving home. You're feeling really good. Playing the music. Everything's great. You're driving home. And as you drive along towards your home to show your husband or your wife or your kids, or you're driving, you can't wait to show everybody at work. You're driving along in your car. In the distance, you see some smoke. And you don't know what that smoke is, but in the distance, you just see some smoke like you do. And you think, it's a bushfire. As you get closer, you see that the smoke isn't, it's quite dark, so it's not a bushfire type of smoke. And it's sort of in the direction of where you're driving. So you get closer and closer to home, and you start to think, geez, that's quite close to my neighbourhood. And you think, oh, yeah. So you're closer and closer, and you're in your neighbourhood. And you think, geez, this is actually looks like it might be down my street. So you pull into your street, and there's fire engines everywhere, and there's police cars whizzing by, and there's hoses across the road, and you go screaming up the street, and lo and behold, guess what? Your house is on fire. There's people running around everywhere, and they're all panicking and looking dreadful, and you walk up to someone who's a neighbour, and she looks stressed and distressed, and you say, have you seen my wife and kids? They say, no, look, I think they're still in the house. Okay. Now I want you to tell me on a scale of 1 to 10 about that car story in the crash. Tell me if you'd like to change your vote. I think a lot of you, I think most of you, would in reassessing things, if looking at things slightly differently from a different perspective with more information, you'd start thinking about things differently. And that's the way. That's an absolute. It's one of those things in life that it's an absolute. Is that people change. People change their thinking with different set of circumstances, with more information. People will change. If you're thinking about changing your cultures, or you have changed your cultures, you're in the process of changing your cultures. If you want a different sort of culture, that will involve change, and it will involve change in your people. And I hear people say, "Oh, people can't change; they never change. People over 40 never change. Men over 45 never change." You hear that, but people do change. Most of you change your thinking, just like that, for no real reason, but you had more information. People look at things differently. People always look at things differently. I'll tell you about something that influenced my early thinking on leadership and management styles. I worked for a guy many years ago, about 25 years ago, I worked for a guy whose name was Mike Argos. Now, I've changed the name just slightly because a constructive leader actually wouldn't publicly vilify someone, even if it was from 25 years ago. But he's very close to his name. His name was Mike Argos. And he was a dinosaur, and he was this fat little red-headed guy. I've got nothing against fat people or redheads. So if you're fat and you've got red hair, I apologize. He just happened to be fat and have red hair. But he was a dictatorial, threatening leader, and he was hated by everybody. And he had this red felt pen. He was actually ahead of his time. He had a red felt pen as well as red hair, and he was a red leader. Right? I was a restaurant manager at the time, and he used to come into my store, and he used to write in big red letters over my paperwork if he didn't like what the results were. Right? And he'd write dreadful, dreadful things, and he'd take the clipboard and he'd pin it up for all my staff to see it, right? If there was a red leader, it was Mike Argos. I remember this true story. It was my day off, and my assistant manager was running the store, and the young lady who cut the vegetables in the morning was chopping up the cucumbers. That was one of those machines, automatic machines, and you use a feeder, but she didn't use the feeder; she used the fingers. So the top of one of her fingers ended up with the cucumbers. And the assistant manager rushed her off to hospital. They found the finger and put it in a vanilla milkshake, which the first aid said put it in ice, but he decided to put it in a vanilla milkshake. but it was cold. And hey, innovation initiative, we like that. So. Anyway, took her to hospital. The only problem with the assistant manager, he was a haemophiliac and he fainted at the sight of blood, so they both ended up in hospital. True story. Anyway, it was my day off, but I got a call, so I went to the hospital to see how they were doing. And then Mike Argos decided to, I called him and he came in too. And he told me I had to give these people a written warning, a counselling. It's true. His girl lying in hospital with a hand in bandage and the finger over there on the shelf in this vanilla milkshake, and he says, "Write her up." And then he wanted me to write up the assistant manager for leaving the restaurant without permission. It's true. True. So poor old Mike ended up getting sacked, which was sad. But the reason I tell you the story is because he had a huge influence over my attitude towards leadership and culture, because I saw the impact that he had on the people who worked around him and for him, and it was negative. And they wanted to go slow. They hated him. They hated the company. And he created. Now this is an extreme, but sometimes it's important to look at extremes. And he had a huge bearing over my belief and an understanding of what good leadership can achieve. And last time I heard of Mike, he'd gone a little feral, actually. So it was all very sad. But he led by fear and intimidation, and he maybe occasionally got some short-term results, but he certainly didn't get long-term results. This was in the States. So the guy around the company was the president. So the president of the company, he was a fairly broad-minded sort of a guy. And I think he recognized this. He introduced a program called New Age Thinking for the Modern Leader. This is 25 years ago. And it talked about empowerment, it talked about humanistic behavior, and that was really the second step towards my understanding of what I believe in good leadership and what you can achieve through a good culture. So I'm going to briefly today just talk a little bit about Freedom Group, who we are. I'll talk a little bit about our cultural evolution. little bit more about my leadership journey. I'm going to talk about what I think are just some keys to constructive leadership and culture, and then I'll give you some final thoughts. So what about Freedom? And most of you would have shopped at a Freedom, but if you've shopped at a Bay Swiss, then you've also shopped at the Freedom Group, because Bay Swiss is part of the Freedom Group, as is Guests, as is in New Zealand a brand called Levine. There's an Anderson's brand down in Melbourne, and in the UK we have a brand called Cargo. When I joined the company about 11 years ago, we had 32 stores, and we're doing under $200 million a year in turnover, had about 1,500 employees. We were so small that we were able to have a state meeting every month in Brisbane, Melbourne and Sydney with the whole senior team and every store manager. I knew every store manager, every assistant manager, every warehouse manager, every homewares manager, and many salespeople by first name, and they knew me. But we've grown since then. Today we have about 240 stores. We're doing about quadruple that volume, somewhere around $800 million in turnover. We've got 5 factories, 8 distribution centres, and over 5,000 employees and franchisees. But during that time, I think we've been through more change than a lot of companies go through in 50 years. In fact, when I took over as MD, I was the 5th managing director in 7 years. And that's a lot of change, because every leader, the head of every organisation has a slightly different way of doing things. So we've been through a lot of tumultuous change. But developing a cultural environment that we thought would take us to the future was something that was a goal of the then managing director, Jonathan Pinshaw, who was a good leader, and his senior team. We all believed that we had to implement cultural change in our organisation to be able to take us where we wanted to go. And we had lofty goals. We knew that we wanted to grow the business. We knew we wanted to add brands. We knew we wanted to go overseas. And to achieve that, we knew that we had to develop a culture that would best enable us to achieve those goals. So we set about that task. I'll talk to you, and look, I love this little chart because it's simple, and I think that in business and life, but certainly in business, people make things too complex, and I think this is just a great little chart that says it all. And if you don't believe this, then you probably have to reassess your thinking. If you don't believe that leadership actually can have an impact on culture, and then the culture has an impact on the leadership in the organisation, and they both help to produce performance, then my opinion is that you've got it wrong, because I think this is just a great little, simple little model that actually is true. But we did various things within Freedom to help start this cultural evolution going. The first actual thing that we did that I remember, this is a banner that hangs in our support centre in Lane Cove, and it's signed by everybody who worked at our office at the time, and we used to call our support centre the head office. And we decided that as a symbolic gesture, we were going to change the name from head office to support centre, because head office just kind of reeks of hierarchy and ivory tower and important people making important decisions about other people's lives. And we wanted to say that the head office was actually there for one reason, and that was to support the field, where we interact with the most important person, which is the customer who ultimately pays the bills. And so we changed the name, and everybody signed it. And if anybody was caught caught saying head office and not support centre, they were fined 50 cents, and it went into a jar and went to charity. And that just helped reinforce it. So that was the first thing we did. We introduced national conferences where we have a lot of fun, where we reinforce our values, where we reward people and recognise them for what they've achieved in the previous year, and we set the tone and direction for the upcoming year. And this is probably the most important thing we've done in terms of developing a culture within our organisation. We then introduced recognition certificates. Now, I'm sure you all have some sort of recognition system within your organisations. What's great about our system, I think, is that any person in the organisation at any time can and does give a recognition certificate to other people. So you have PAs giving MDs recognition certificates, and you have warehouse workers giving their bosses and directors, and you have directors giving other people. People are constantly giving recognition certificates to each other, and we try and hand them over at public forums. So whenever there's a meeting or a gathering, we try and hand them over with a little speech, and I think that's been a wonderful initiative. And we give out I get writer's cramp from signing these things, and we used to just sign a few a week, and now we have dozens coming through constantly, so that's been great. We introduced a vision. I'm sure you all have a vision, and we introduced our vision. And if you've been to a Freedom, I don't know whether you had the world's best retail experience, but that's what we try and deliver. We want to give every customer the best experience they could possibly have. We introduced a set of values, and a lot of things in between. But we introduced a set of values. And our values were decided upon by our people. So we got basically the whole organisation involved in deciding what our values should be. They had workshops across the whole country, and they came back to us and said, this is what we think. And then they came back to us and we tried to consolidate them to a smaller number. We debated long and hard about a couple of these, like profit. We said, profit, geez, is that really a value? And we decided at the end of the day, if we don't make money, we don't expand, we don't give people opportunities, we can't give them increases, there's no bonuses, there's no company. And we said, that's really important. And then we launched that, and it's ingrained in people. We gave them a pair of socks with values written on it, an umbrella with values written on it, all the usual things. And now when we make decisions, we talk about our values. Does that fit with our values? So they're just some of the things that we've done in our journey towards a constructive sort of culture. Every year I get the directors love to do something really stupid in front of the rest of the organisation. Because I think in leadership, humility is very important. And actually having a laugh at yourself is actually really valuable. And we always try and sort of tie what we do in with the theme. But one year we dressed up as superheroes and did this silly video, and another year we did this spoof on Gilligan's Island, and one year we did a Forrest Gump thing, and one year we did Irish dancing, and it's really, really silly, but our staff love it. And we dressed up as village people one time and did this thing. So, and then I sort of get goosebumps thinking about it. And the piece de resistance was this one year, and that I told you where we were bald up there. We had our heads shaven, and it'd take me half an hour to explain it all, but we had our heads shaven. So I had my head shaven in front of the whole company live on stage, and money went to charity and so on. But that was actually quite a humbling experience. But we do that sort of stuff, and it shows the company, it shows everybody else in the organisation that we're just normal people like they are, and where there's vulnerability and there's sensitivity, and that we're no more special than they are. We just, for whatever reason, happen to be doing a different job than they are. And that's what we truly believe. I've done a lot of leadership type courses and programs over the years, some 360 programs. We knew what we wanted to achieve, where we were in our evolution towards the sort of culture we wanted. And so when we came across the whole LSI program and what Human Synergistics had done, I really liked it. So the first thing I did was take my senior team. This was shortly after I took over as managing director. I took my senior team away for a couple of days up to the Hunter Valley, and they, on the way there, were talking about us going tree hugging, and had the usual jibes from them. But we went away and we embarked on the LSI, and we had it done on ourselves. So that was my description of self. Back in 2000, and we'd come off a fairly torrent period where there was a selection process going on for the new managing director, and there was some internal competition, and so things were not as great as they could have been, and that's where I was back in 2000. Now, I was listening to Lee's speech, and I did notice that he commented it on my profile, and being the more constructive of the two of us, I'd like to refer Lee to, and many of you have seen this, is the Lifestyles Inventory, How to Use Your LSI Profile Summary, Lee. And under High Competitive, it says, resist the urge to define things in competitive terms, Lee. Instead of fighting to win, simply strive to do your best, Lee. So I just thought I'd share that with Lee. Now, the truth is, if I was a really constructive leader, I just would have taken it on the chin and said nothing, but I did warn Lee that I would have the last laugh. So then by 2003, I'd certainly still had a fairly positive description of myself. That's description of self, yep. And I guess my profile had improved by 2003. And the interesting thing is, if you'd asked me, was I a blue leader 20 years ago, I would have said yes. And it's that old story of, if you only knew then what you know now. Of course, the scary thing about that is in 10 years' time, you'll be saying the same thing. So you can only work with and do what you can based on where you are currently. But I want to tell you just a little story about that I came across. This is Dr. Franklin Sonn, and Dr. Franklin Sonn was the first. He was the first black. He went to the US as the ambassador, the first black South African ambassador to go to the US after apartheid. Was the first ambassador after apartheid, and certainly the first black. And I had the pleasure of spending some time with him when I was in South Africa recently, and we had lunch one day, and there was about 8 of us having lunch. And he told us a story. Now you all know the story of Nelson Mandela and what happened, and he really just told that story. And I'm going to just tell you a bit of it, and I won't be able to reproduce it as well as he did. But this was very emotional for him. In fact, towards the end, he had tears streaming down his face, and his wife was there, and she had tears streaming down her face. And there was 8 of us all together, and there was 3 ladies there, and they were crying. Of course, us boys weren't crying because we're men. But there was just we were a little misty, and he just told the story of Nelson Mandela. And you all know Nelson Mandela was put in jail for 27 years, and when he came out of jail. When he was let out, he was put away, as you know, for nothing. You know, he did nothing wrong. And after 27 years, he came out. And Franklin was telling the story. He was telling how he wrote to him, and his letters never got to Nelson Mandela, and they were good friends. And Nelson Mandela's letters never got to Franklin. And when he got out of jail, he had to present, and this was his first public appearance. And he presented to thousands of people in this huge auditorium, and the stage was empty. And he walked up on stage, and apparently he sort of staggered back by the weight of the energy and of the people. And there were 2 factions. Over here on the left was sort of one faction, and that was led by Dr. Franklin Sonn. And that was the sort of the delegate, or the group that believed in peace and reconciliation and dialogue and forgiveness. On the right over here, there was a more militant group led by another leader. And they wanted revenge, and they wanted to grab power and I guess if anybody would have a reason for wanting revenge, it would be Nelson Mandela, after 27 years of incarceration for nothing. And Franklin was telling the story, and tears are in his eyes, and Nelson Mandela got up on stage, and they knew that he was going to tell the people what the future was, the way they were going to go, what was the direction. And the first thing he said was he turned over to the left to Franklin, and he said, "Franklin," he said, "why don't you come up on stage and greet me?" And that was the moment that he told the world that he wanted peace and reconciliation. And it just hit me sitting there, and everybody knows this story, but it just hit me that there was real leadership. There was true leadership after 27 years in jail for no reason. This great leader came out and said peace and reconciliation. And so no matter how good a leader you think you are, no matter how good a leader I think I am, I think there's always room to grow, and there's always room to learn. We can always continue to learn. So I'm going to just quickly, our culture and then the group's results as a result of that through the eyes of LSI and OCI. First of all, when I did it, I had my senior team go through LSI, and that's the development of my senior team from 2000 to 2001. And as you can see from that, it started out fairly good, but we weren't satisfied as a team, and we wanted to improve that. I think we regressed by August 2001, and then there was good improvement by 2003. And we achieved that by change with the people in the group, and also some of the group changed. And what is that expression? Dripping water will eventually wear away stones, or sometimes it's just easy to move the stones. And there was a bit of both of that. You know, we started the water dripping, and people started to change, but the nature and makeup of the team also changed. And so the senior team, I think that's very, very important. In cultural change, if the leadership, if the people running the company aren't willing to change and don't change, then I think that it will never be achieved. I think it has to come from the very top. If you're an organisation and the CEO isn't blue, or he doesn't believe that a blue culture is the right way to go, then I think it's going to be tough for you. I worked for a company for a while, and we went away for 2 days of exchange and cultural development and leadership stuff, and we had this 360 course, and about halfway through the first day, we got the results of the 360 feedback. We spent the next day and a half, the managing director, trying to find out who said what about him, right? And some of you would have had experiences like that. And we were never going to change the culture of that organisation, because all the managing director was worried about was who said what, and not what the organisation needed. So this was what the company said they wanted. They didn't like green at all. And this is where we were. And I'm told that actually wasn't bad for a sort of starting point. And then by 2004, what people wanted hadn't changed much. And I'd love to be able to say, and this is a compliment to Lee, I'd love to be able to say that our change was as dramatic as his was. It wasn't. We actually didn't make huge progress to where we wanted to go. Some of the red had been reduced, green had grown a little bit, the blue hadn't changed significantly. And we need to test ourselves again, I think. I think we have some challenges that are unique to our industry. I think our industry and probably the restaurant industry, and there may be others, retail, because we have 5,000 employees that are spread out over 3 countries, every state and territory of Australia. We have 1 store in Darwin and 1 store here and 3 stores there and 2 stores there. So our challenge is to be able to affect cultural change throughout these remote locations. The only way you do that is to get the leader of those business units, get that store manager in Darwin. He's got to be a blue leader. He's got to be aligned. And that's a unique sort of challenge. To have sort of a support centre of 200 people all working together in one building, I think that would be in relative terms much easier to affect the sort of change you want. So that's our challenge. Also a young industry, we have young people working for us. A lot of people work for us who are just looking for a part-time job or a casual job, get some money while they're at university, and they don't stay long. And affecting cultural change with high turnover of staff like that is also more challenging than a more stable environment. But after that, we broke things down a little bit to try and understand where there were roadblocks. So we broke it down by New Zealand, our Australian support centre, distribution, retail Australia, etc. We broke it down in as many ways we could to try and understand where there were roadblocks. Because in cultural change, you sometimes have roadblocks, and especially when you have all these locations. And then we also broke it down by management, senior management, middle management, line management, and non-management, again, to try and understand where we needed to put the most effort. And every area of the business, we had a specific business plan and an action plan put together to try and help us achieve what we needed to achieve. So that action plan was put together, shared with the management of that area, and then implemented, and the change is well underway. So I don't know if this is a tough question or not for you. Is there a correlation between business results and organisational culture? And we've had some great results over the last 5 years or so. And I'd love to be able to share those results with you in detail, with a detailed P&L, and show you everything. Unfortunately, I can't. Our major equity partner is a public company, and they're in a period before announcement, so I just can't share detailed results with you as much as I really would love to. What I can tell you is that since 2001, we've had 15% per annum compounded growth in our top line, which is a great result. And our EBITDA is up almost as much as that. It was about that level up until this last year. This last year's been a little tougher. The retail market has tightened up, so this afternoon I'd like you all to go out and buy some furniture. It'd be great. But it is a bit tougher, but certainly we've had some really wonderful results during that period. And so, look, I don't think it's a tough question at all. I think it's an easy question and an easy answer. No matter what the culture is, it will always have an impact on culture. Because the culture you have will act as a magnet and it acts as a filter. I worked for a company for a very short time, 9 months, the most miserable 9 months of my life. It was a real mistake. And because I just didn't fit with that culture. I moved interstate for this company. I paid for it out of my own money and was told I'd be reimbursed immediately. It took me several months to get my money. I moved for them, paid for our own money, and I couldn't get them to reimburse my expenses for months and months and months. I could give you dozens of examples. But I just didn't fit with the culture, the values of that company. And so I was filtered out. That's fine. That sort of culture, it's not who I am. And it's also a magnet. So that company will attract the sort of people that like that sort of environment. So the culture of your company will attract and detract. So it'll act as a filter and a magnet. So I'm going to just going to give you a few my thoughts on some of the keys to constructive leadership and culture. And then, look, these are just my thoughts. My people hear me say this all the time. Surround yourself with great people and give them plenty of opportunity to make mistakes. Blue people practice blue values. And why do you want them to make mistakes? Well, we believe in our organisation, one of our values is innovation. If you're not innovating, then you're not trying things. And if you're not trying things, that means you're scared of making mistakes. So if you're not making mistakes, it means you're not innovating. So, I know leaders who surround themselves with terrible people, and that's dumb. You've got to surround yourself with great people, and then let them get on and do their jobs. Life's short. Sean talked a little earlier about courage, and I think sometimes you've got to make courageous decisions in life, and because it is short. And I think that I didn't say it first: bite off more than you can chew and chew like hell. I think Harry Truman said it. But I believe in that because, this is my greatest fear is lying on my deathbed thinking, boy, I wish I'd done more. So we encourage our people to move forward. And if you want to make cultural change, there's no time like the present. I'd say throw yourself in. I promote people sometimes, and they say, I'm not ready. Well, who's ever ready for a promotion? Who's ever be ready until you actually do it? Until you actually do the job? How can you be 100% ready for it? Seek out and learn from others and their mistakes. Find mentors. Find business leaders, find friends, colleagues. I always say I'll listen to a drunk walking down the street if I think I can learn from him. And we should always be willing to learn and develop and grow ourselves. Hold your people accountable. Leadership with accountability is merely management. When we first introduced LSI, people sort of got this impression that blue was warm and fuzzy and nice and comfortable. And blue is tough. Blue is tough. It doesn't have to be warm and fuzzy. Holding your people accountable is desperately important in any organisation. And if you get confused and you think blue was warm and fuzzy and soft and people can just do their own thing, it doesn't matter, then in my opinion you're wrong. You must hold your people accountable. You and your team must lead by example. There's no point trying to implement cultural change. There's no point trying to do things differently unless you are willing to lead by example. So you've got to get people to do as you do, not do as you say. You and your teams, whether it's the very top of the organisation or a business unit, like for us, a store, if that store manager doesn't practice it, then it isn't going to work. Organisational capability, hire and develop the right people. The organisation has got to have the capability to do what you want it to do. It's no point implementing things that you don't have the capability to do. So if you don't have the tools to be able to implement cultural change within the organisation, then you've got to get someone to come in and help you. And that applies to every aspect of the business, of course, but certainly in cultural change and leadership. If you're not growing, you're dying. Again, I didn't say that first, but I don't think an organisation can stay static in the middle. It either has to be growing or dying. If it's staying in the middle, if it's not growing, then people aren't going to want to work there because people naturally want to grow and develop and go into bigger and better things and learn and earn more money. So the organisation must move forward. So your execution must be good. Innovation, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. It just sounds crazy. It's true. If you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. Trying things, innovation, letting people make mistakes. Focus and over-communicate and stick to it. Focus on what you want. If you want cultural change, then decide you want it and stick to it. Our second results weren't as good as I would have liked them. But that's just a challenge. That's just, okay, well, what do we need to do to make them better? What do we need to do to move forward? And then you need to communicate to your people. You need to constantly be talking to your people about what you're trying to do. You can't assume that they're going to know. And then stick to it, no matter how tough it might be. People can and do change things. And it doesn't matter we're not all going to be recognised by the rest of the world like, Muhammad Ali. But I think within our spheres of influence, we can make a difference. I'm going to just leave you, finally. I send out a weekly email to all my staff. And the first week I was managing director, I just wanted to just tell them a little bit about myself. So I sent an email, and then I thought, well, I left some stuff off, so I did one the second week, and then I did one the third week, and then, I don't know, what number am I up to now? It's 270 or something. And I send one every week, and for me it's a way to communicate to my staff, but it's also a way for me to get input and feedback from them, because I would get 1 or 2, sometimes 3 replies per week from them, and that's really valuable input. And I was last week I was sitting putting some notes down for this, and I wasn't sure how I would end it, and I received this letter or this email from someone who was responding to one of my emails, which I just call food for thought. And I thought I'd read it to you because I think it sort of sums up a lot of the things I've been talking about. It says, "Hello, Mr. Walker. I've been employed with Freedom for going on 5 years. I'm now in customer service, and I've learned so much more about freedom since coming into this part of the business. My husband has also been with Freedom for 10 years now and has seen a lot of changes along the way. I've always felt compelled to send you an email in regards to your weekly email. Mr. Walker, I'm a mother of 5 children and the youngest is 16 years old. All except one has gone through their schooling and done reasonably well for themselves. The one that failed at school is also now employed here. In my response to her, I told her that her child hadn't failed, that just one door had closed and another one had opened, which she appreciated. When I first logged in and received my first email from you, I immediately thought, I don't think this is for me. So that worked. Why would the CEO be sending an email for me to read? So I deleted it. Stick to it, don't give up, huh? As time went by, one of your emails caught my eye, so I decided to open and read it. I was pleasantly surprised to find that, hey, this is for me, and there is no mistake, Rod Walker does want me to read this. Since then, as my children went through their schooling, I have read every one of your food for thoughts and would take these home and share them with my children as a tool for them. The greatest thing was when we sat around and discussed what part of the information best suited them in their particular environment. They, like myself, have taken your valuable input and have developed themselves around what you share with us. Mr. Walker, I'd like to take this opportunity in thanking you for caring enough to share all this with your employees. Once again, you share valuable information which gives all your employees equal opportunities to grab the information given and run with it. It reassures me that you and the company cares. Now, for me, that sort of letter is just as great a reward as a fabulous sales month. Because what it says is that what we're trying to do in terms of develop a culture in the organisation is actually working. And if I had 5,000 employees like that, I could march to hell and back, because the trust and the loyalty that she has, and her husband and her 16-year-old child, you just can't buy that sort of loyalty and trust. You just can't buy it. And so, look, in summary, we're not where we want to be yet, but I don't think you ever are where you want to get to. In terms of cultural evolution, I don't think you ever get there. I think you're always striving to do better, because there's always more you can do. But thank you very much for your time.